As I'm sure some of you are aware, my existence is getting nowhere. So that being said, since I got plenty of time before bed, I shall honor a request that was made of this retarded talking head. That said, it's another one from the Discord, also known as Purgatory, from a new person in the Discord. I don't even know how to say that, but I'll try. From tilde, 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 whatever, however you say that. I don't even know what it's supposed to be, a name or just an alias or what. But from the Discord, a newer member on the Discord, link in the description box down below. Kyle hates hiking. I don't. I love hiking. And everywhere I go, I am armed. So I don't really have to worry too much about nobody doing some dumb shit. And I am overly cautious. So if you randomly run into an electric fence out in the middle of goddamn nowhere surrounding a campsite, it's probably me. Or some Poogie traps. That being said, from Kyle Hates Hiking, this uncensored footage is why I will never go mountaineering, period. Sounds like some weak sauce to me, but I don't know. Maybe he'll change my mind and he'll have seen something or heard of something, or this footage will be something that I've never seen in real life. Highly doubt it, because I've done a lot of stuff. But anyway, let's get tough.
Footage messed me up so.
What in the actual F? It's so low. Okay, I gotta turn it up a bit.
Bad, and it only got worse when I learned the full story behind it.
Hello. Really praying and hoping someone would come and rescue me.
That footage was recorded in April of 2023, somewhere around 19,000 feet in elevation on Mount Annapurna, which is the most dangerous peak on Earth, statistically speaking. The man you hear in the video is 34-year-old Anurag Maloo, and
why am I not surprised? I'm genuinely not surprised. Not at all surprised. Why? Because this is actually somewhere I've been before. Maybe if I make enough, if I ever get monetized, not going to happen. YouTube is too leftist. They hate my existence entirely in all of its entirety. Just because I'm a filthy right-wing extremist. But mostly because I'm an ex-soldier. That said, yeah, I've been in a lot of places, seen a lot of faces. Hell, I've even mixed with different races. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. That said, not surprised at all, period. Whatsoever. But let's continue. I'm going to try not to drag this video out too much terribly longer.
and he's trapped at the bottom of a deep glacier. He knows his only chance at survival is if someone rescues him, but what he doesn't know is that the men he was climbing with just left him for dead. And so with no other option but to just wait, Anurag pressed record on his GoPro. He was alive and he was conscious, at least for the time being, and so he would continue recording messages for his family, for his own sanity, and for whoever eventually would recover his body. But after some time, his GoPro died, and essentially Anurag did too. But what happened next is almost too unbelievable to be true, and I have even more footage to prove that it's all real. Anurag Maloo is a name that most of you probably haven't heard before, but I promise you, that by the end of this video, you are going to remember his name for a very, very long time. And speaking of a long time, I've been making these videos for a long time, and I would love to hit 1 million subscribers this year in 2026. And so if you would click subscribe as we get into this truly wild story, it would mean the world. And if you're already subscribed, I appreciate you guys.
I'm gonna admit this guy. Look, I know some people, they just see the face and they're like, oh, and that's it. Me, I can feel the performance from here. But I get it. I understand. You gotta be, and you could tell he's on something as well. Probably Adderall. A lot of people can get Adderall so they can be high energy. A lot of content creators do this as well. How I know? Well, I've met quite a few of them. And they are jacked up beyond belief. But I gotta say, to me, all right, it's much more. Wait, they don't use that C word anymore. They say cringe. It's very cringe, right? But I get it. The slop, being all like, and I'm right in your face, man, and this whole thing, am I making it exciting because I'm trying to raise your cortisol levels because I am trying to be as exciting as possible to keep you entertained and keep your 5-second only interview of brain rot attention span stuck on me, and that's the only way it's got to be, and I can't do this naturally for too long, and that shit is tiring as fuck. It really is. I know whoever it was didn't recommend this person to me because they were thinking I would be getting cringed out by a fellow content creator, but I don't like stuff like this. I really don't. I like Mr. Ballin better because, he's just natural and organic as he is. It's just him doing his thing as him. He's not jacked up on Adderall like this guy is. And no, nobody's naturally that high energy on average. It's a very select few type of people that truly are as such. All right? The vast majority are on something or doing something, or they're trying to play it up really hard in order to make sure they get all the stuff they can from you, which is your attention. That said, I'll try to be okay with it, but the way this guy's looking at me, maybe that's part of the strategy. That said, let's continue.
So much. So Anurag Maloo was born on June 13th, 1989 in Kashangar, Rajasthan, India. And just a side note, I'm going to do my best with these pronunciations. I really apologize if I mess them up. Now, this was a small city, and his family...
Nobody truly cares if you do. I've had experience with people all over South Asia and Southeast Asia. They really don't care. And the very few that will try to correct you just want to ensure they know what you're talking about, or at least in my experience. Only a select few are these, like word snobs, okay?
Family was quite traditional. No one in his family had ever climbed mountains before. No one had even traveled the world. And so for Anurag, going to college and getting a degree in engineering would have been more than enough, right? And he did do that, but instead of taking some corporate job, he joined Teach for India, a nonprofit that sends young professionals to teach in low-income schools across the country. Anurag wanted to make a difference, and while teaching, he realized that the kids he was teaching, who were mostly from disadvantaged backgrounds, we'll say, well,
that's a huge percentage of people in India, I swear to God. Oh, man. It's definitely not all sunshine and roses. If you've been there, if you know, you know.
He realized that they needed a lot more than just...
But yeah, what was the organization he said?
And he did do that, but instead of taking some corporate job, he joined Teach for India, a nonprofit that sends young professionals to teach in low-income schools across the country.
Oh. Well, that's unfortunate of him. I'm sure that the intention was good. But if it's the same organization I'm thinking of, maybe, well, you know what? No, I'm not going to mention it. I'm probably wrong. I doubt it's the same one linked to all that horrible evil stuff, but let's continue.
They needed to see what was possible, what you could achieve. They needed someone to show them that the world was bigger than the circumstances they were trapped in. And so Anurag started dreaming big, like really big. In 2011, he participated in the Jagriti Yatra, which was a 15-day train journey across India designed to inspire young entrepreneurs. He met change makers, social innovators, people who were trying to solve like real problems, you know.
Okay, I'm going to be blunt about this part. In my experience with anyone who's described like any of these things, period, domestically, internationally, I mean, everywhere I've found these people, everywhere I've encountered these, supposed charity people, these supposed, charity tourists, these change makers. My God, I hate that term. These, social change wannabes and all that. Every single time I've come across the vast majority of these, how do I condense and consolidate a descriptive word for all of them combined? Putrid. That might be a pretty good one. Putrid. Putrid. All right. These are the type of people who are just like the ones who went to Cuba recently to show support for the communist regime and basically spitting in the faces of the actual people of Cuba that are suffering under the communist regime. It's the same exact type of people. I've met a few here or there who were true and honest and straightforward actual people trying to effect good moral and ethical change in this world. A few of them are dead for, well, the obvious reasons, for traveling to areas where animalistic savagery is the norm and is entirely the opposite of Western cultural civilization. And some of them are still trying. Last time I ever heard from them. It's been some years now. But highly and extremely deluded. I mean, I met a guy who thought that he could change the rape culture of people in Nigeria. And he said he was going to go there to educate them on why it's a bad thing. He ended up becoming someone who actually worked for a different nation in Africa, I won't say which one, to instead help them to hunt down poachers. Because he had a really nasty run-in with, the same exact people that enjoy the, raping festival that was there. And then, haven't heard back from him since. So I've met a lot of these types. The vast majority are actually not good people. They think they are. They profess as much. They think that if they, introduce, what was it? What was the one really retarded one I heard of them doing in Pakistan? It was like, they were trying, I'm trying to remember how they described it to me. Because this was a couple of females and some dude that was with them. And, all Westerners, all from the U.S., Two of them from LA. One of them was from, he was from Washington State. But they met at UCLA. And they were going to Pakistan to try and bridge the gap of equality between men and women there by introducing gender studies for women there to the men of Pakistan. It's been about 4 years. I haven't heard nothing from them or about them. And there's been a war between Pakistan and India in that time. So, I'm assuming what usually can happen in such a situation probably did. We just don't know about it. This stuff happens a lot more than people think. A huge amount more than people are ever heard from. And a greater amount more than you will ever hear of because it's inconvenient for news media to report on such things because it shatters their narratives about multiculturalism being a positive, conducive good for everybody. When some cultures are literally just garbage. That said, let's continue. You want my honest thoughts on this one? You're getting them.
Know what I mean? And in 2013, Anurag got invited on an expedition that would ultimately change his life. The Inspire International Antarctica Expedition with Sir Robert Swan, who was the first person to walk both the North and South Poles. He found a new purpose, and from then on, he committed his life to climate studies at the world's highest peaks and in the world's coldest regions.
How did I know? How did I know? I was guessing he was into climate science of some kind, all right? Some kind of climate stuff. The truth is, the good amount of the supposed climatology, climate science, whatever stuff, a good amount of it, unfortunately, is just BS. It's bullshit. The greater number. Why? Because you have a huge amount of people, just like I described earlier, who are involved with it. If it was true, honest, raw, and real, in-depth science being done, right, I'd be singing a different tune. But the vast majority of it is a bunch of stuff just put together and spewed out just so that they could get their, research projects funded or, so they can convince people that they're basically con men and con women. Well, what's a con woman? Isn't there a name for that? Whatever, same thing. Which is sad because there's actually a lot of cool stuff we can discover through, all right, the science of studying the climate and looking at its changes over time. The unfortunate fact of the matter is the vast majority of people involved with it, charlatans, liars, cons, and frauds. Thus, people can't trust, any science or nothing or medical or nothing nowadays because it's so rampant that now we're returning to people just deciding not to get any vaccines, period, even though some of them used to work.
So as you can imagine, this would require him to begin training as a mountaineer. By 2022...
One cool thing I've heard, okay? Training as a mountaineer. You, thankfully, cannot bullshit with this stuff. You cannot bullshit mountaineering training. It's impossible. Why? Because if you truly train to be a mountaineer, you could die in training if you do some bullshit. It's not a joke. All right? One of my first jobs in the Army required for me to do mountaineering training. 10th mountain. Climb to glory. Right over the line. All right, that said, you cannot bullshit that. Thank God you can't. It's not like science where you can just come up with some wobbly-doo and just say, oh, well, this thing, and just list it all up. And then nobody else can test it except you, and your peers will just all agree with you and say it's true. It's not like that at all. If you screw up some shit while you're doing mountaineering training, even for our mountaineering training, we had some. It was still kind of rare because everybody definitely listened, because you're not going to dangle off the side of a freaking 50-foot cliff and be screwing around, period, because you might actually die. So you definitely listen and do what you're told, and you learn some shit. But thankfully, all right, like, you can't BS hard stuff like this. So, freaking heavy kudos to him for, for going to some kind of mountaineering training.
Anurag had climbed over 10 peaks and passes and had been to over 60 countries across all 7 continents. And at every single...
Hey! So he's similar to me in a way. Except I've most likely climbed more. You see, the greater number of people who do mountaineering, mountain climbing, tourist climbing and all that, yeah, they'll climb a thing, and then they climb down. And then that's it. Quite often and on average, right? That's just that. Whereas for someone like me who covered like something around 90% of the mountains in Afghanistan. And I'm not alone in that. Like if you met GWAT personnel who were not just purely mechanized, or they weren't some kind of armored, then you'd meet a shit ton. There's got to be millions of us at this point over 20 years who have climbed pretty much all the mountains in Afghanistan. And there's even a lot of us who ended up going to, because basically on one part of Afghanistan, all right, the Kush is not far away. Neither is the Himalayas. Although whether or not you're supposed to be there is a totally different discussion to be had. I'm just saying. But yeah, then again, right, that's going to be a major difference between he and I. I've done more climbing because, well, that was part of my whole entire profession, job, and, mission set for freaking ever. So that makes sense. Still, respect, all right? Climbing, doing the kind of climbing that he would be doing, just as a dude, just as a guy, respect.
Summit he reached, he would talk with the people around him about the mountain communities that depend on these ecosystems. However, despite all of this experience, both in the mountains and professionally, he still hadn't climbed any of the 8,000ers. The 14 mountains whose peaks cross above 8,000 meters. And of course, some of these include K2, or Makalu, and who could forget probably the most famous one, Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the entire world. And so in
debatable, because there are mountains under the ocean bigger than Everest. Way bigger. Actually, I'm kind of curious now. I wonder if there is like a record for being able to get to the bottom of one of the tallest mountains in the ocean. I wonder. Well, anyway, that said, just a little tangent.
2023, Anurag decided that he would start his quest to conquer all 14 of these peaks, and the first one he would take on would be Annapurna. And listen, I'm no mountaineer, but I still think it's a little crazy that he chose Annapurna as his first choice for these peaks, because let's just say that this particular mountain has earned a nickname, the Killer Mountain.
Honestly, they're all called that. There's even places in Afghanistan that even the locals didn't freaking go to. So, yeah. There's a lot of mountains that are called killer mountains. Because, well, people die on mountains. It's kind of a thing that happens. But that's no surprise, honestly. And as someone who's a mountaineer, I'll say this much. Any mountain can kill you. It doesn't have to be high. Any of them can. All right? Even the easiest ones, which you would think nobody could fail, even in their old age. It happens. Because people gonna people. And a lot of people gonna be doing some stupid people stuff. So that's just what happens. And then there's other cases where it's like there's other cases where it's like unfortunate accidents or mishaps, right? So there's a lot of those as well. That said, be good and be safe.
Oh, and it's earned it for good reason. From my understanding, even Mount Everest is
But yeah, picking Annapurna as your very first one, and you're just a dude. Bub, that's tough. That's tough. His first mistake was picking Annapurna. All right? That was definitely his first mistake, period. And that sealed his fate.
like a cakewalk compared to Annapurna, and Anurag was about to learn this the hard way. Now, I would never stand a chance to climb a mountain nicknamed the Killer Mountain, but if I were to try, well, you can guarantee that I would be drinking Element the entire way. Element is this video sponsor, and they are the best and most creative electrolyte company out there. Take this for example. Parts of the second coming singer, I spark me your bold much they're real right now. It's hiking the stick. Walmart free Element. Nepal's Annapurna sits at
Yeah, like everybody else, I hate ads. I really do. Even if I got sponsorships or sponsors, I'd just I don't know, make separate videos for them or some shit. Or I'd just put the links in the description box. Because that's about the same amount of effectiveness as doing the ad.
26,545 feet in elevation, or about 8,091 meters. And even though it's only the 10th highest peak in the world, Annapurna has the highest fatality rate of all the 8,000ers. Almost 1 in 3 climbers who attempt Annapurna don't make it back. 1 in 3. Compare that to Mount Everest, for instance, whose fatality rate is around 1 to 2%, or even K2, the second highest mountain in the world, whose death rate is closer to 25%. So you can see that Annapurna is on a whole nother level, basically. And there are 3 reasons for this, and the first is the avalanche danger. Annapurna's south face is notorious for these massive, unpredictable avalanches. The route between Camp 2 and Camp 3 is swept by avalanches constantly. And so climbers try to move through this section as fast as they can because, it's basically a shooting gallery. Annapurna also gets hit with sudden, violent storms that can trap climbers high up on the mountain. The weather can turn from clear skies all the way to whiteout conditions in just minutes and with pretty much zero warning.
Sounds not too terribly dissimilar. All right, because what's really funny is that K2, it is not very much far away from the border of Afghanistan. It's not too terribly far at all. So yeah, just saying that much. And like I said, there's also Parbat, which is there as well, which it isn't too far from K2 either. Doesn't sound too terribly different. Really, it's just location for Annapurna. Okay, I'm gonna get to the Discord. I'm getting a million pings. I don't know what's happening. Give me a schmeckle. It was just some other BS being annoying.
And on top of all the environmental risks,
Wait, what was I saying before? Damn it, I forgot. Oh well, this is long enough already. I'll just...
mountain makes climbers perform some of the most technically difficult maneuvers that exist in the sport, right? There are these giant seracs that hang over climbers' heads. There's deep crevasses that appear out of nowhere and narrow ridges that require perfect balance. That is, unless you don't mind falling to your death. During the weekend that Anurag would attempt his summit, Annapurna would claim another victim, and that was Noel Hanna, a 56-year-old Irish climber who had summited Everest 10 times in the past. He died in his tent at Camp 4 after successfully summiting without supplemental oxygen, which just goes to show that no one is safe on Annapurna unless you're, back at base camp, which happens to be where Anurag found himself in late March of 2023.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I said earlier, picking Annapurna first, I mean, personal to me, I'd do all the other ones all over again first and then go to Annapurna. Or I'd do Annapurna as like a bucket list, like I'm on my way out. I know I'm slowly edging towards death, and it's like, well, I'm going to die anyway. I want to go out, trying to do something, fun and impressive. Also, I have a sinking suspicion they did probably not invest in any type of, I don't know how many people know about these actually. All right, we called them web chains. What web chains are is that you affix them to certain spots along the path, right? And what you do is you use eye bolt anchors. Eye bolts as anchors, and you anchor them in. And then you have multiple selections of rope, right? And then in some cases, chain. Because in some instances, rope can get cut or it can get loose. Even the most secure types of rope climbing gear can slip up at the very worst moments. And I have experience with this. I don't know how many people use them. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen anybody use them outside the military. All right, outside of when I was in. But essentially, it's chains that can go up to 200 pounds, right? For how much they can, hold, like basically almost per square inch. It's really magical shit. And let's say you have, I don't have any good examples of nothing. Actually, wait. These might work. Let's say you hit no, you can't really, nah, whatever. Let's say you're like on some ridge side somewhere. Okay, and you're coming up to it. Well, as you go up the first part, right, you take them chains and you would lay them all across and fix them with eye bolts, okay, so that they're nice and tight. Basically, they're grabbing onto that part like a giant freaking hand, like cobwebs, right? Kind of like how cobwebs can grab onto anything anywhere. These function basically the same. And what you do is you attach many different types of rope to it and some, chain that's meant for 2 people tops. And then, there's some danger to that, but quite often it's like covered grease chain. So it's chain that has like a little sheath on it and it's greased in the center and all of that. But it's got a covering that's tightly affixed to the chain itself, so that even if you grab that... Well, anyway, I shouldn't get too much into a tangent. There's so much shit to it. But essentially what it is it's a safety and security measure for, just in case there's an emergency, right? And quite often, I would have a different type of pulley system affixed to them. And the pulley system would be based on somebody else. So, pretty much everybody would have their own. They'd all be attached to it. That way, when you did make it over and down, pretty much anyone could pull each other up, or anyone else could pull themselves up, right? Because in the pulley system, what you can do is you can get on another line, affix yourself to that, and then you could self-recover. It's a lot to get into. It's very complicated stuff, but it's really cool once you figure out how to do it. Anyway, and what was cool about these is they prevented so many horrific, catastrophic, mortal accidents from happening. Because somebody would fall a few feet, the pulley system would slow them down and stop them. Somebody else would be able to affix themselves and then use them as the counterweight to pulley them back up, or just affix themselves to it and then use the pulley system, because it made pulling people up a lot easier. And, there was multiple different redundancies to it. For something like Annapurna, I'd definitely take something like that along. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt to relocate. Yes, it's a major pain in the ass to undo, put together, pack away, and carry with you, because it is added weight. Especially since everybody had to carry at least, a certain piece of it before it could be linked together and put together. And on top of that, it's a bit heavy. Okay, if you're not a seriously physical person, this would cause you some struggle, and you want to be as light as you can without sacrificing what you would need and what is necessary. But for people like us who were used to weighing, 400, sometimes 500 pounds with all of our gear and equipment on, you get used to that shit. You get strong. You either get strong or you break something and then you don't need to be strong anymore. But yeah, I'm guessing they probably didn't have nothing like that, is what my guess is.
Now, here's something important. Anurag decided to attempt Annapurna without supplemental oxygen, just like the previous, now deceased climber that I mentioned a second ago. And this is a huge deal. Climbing above 8,000 meters without oxygen is incredibly rare and incredibly dangerous. Once you're up there, your brain starts losing oxygen at a rapid pace. Your organs start shutting down. Spending over 12 hours in the death zone without supplemental oxygen, well, that means that you're essentially tempting fate. If you get stuck up there for any longer than that, you can pretty much forget it. On the night of April 15th, 2023, Anurag and his Sherpa Dawa started their summit push. They made relatively good time climbing up the mountain, with weather patterns holding out for the most part. They left Camp 4 in the middle of the night, heading for the summit right as the clock struck midnight, now on April 16th. But as they climbed higher, Anurag started feeling sick. The beginning signs of altitude sickness were starting to kick in. Fatigue, a terrible cough that he had been nursing for a few days was getting worse by the second. Every breath felt just so heavy. Every step was agony. And around Camp 5, which was still well below the summit, by the way, Anurag radioed down telling his team that he was not going to summit. He had made his choice. He was going to turn around. And the team radioed back telling him that the weather was turning very bad anyways. And so Anurag and his Sherpa, they made this very smart decision and they started going back down the mountain. And I have to note that in most of the mountaineering stories that I cover on this channel, we hear about someone ignoring their better judgment or not paying attention to early warning signs of trouble and, continuing up the mountain when they should have turned around. But none of that was true in Anurag's story.
I don't know. Picking this one as the first one, I still maintain that as the very first mistake made. Especially as just a dude. Now that said, okay, sure, it sounds like a smart decision to start heading down because he's starting to go through it. Which is why quite often, right, for us at least, I don't know if independent mountaineers and climbers do this very often. All the guys that trained me and all their trainers were guys who did stuff the absolutely most cautious way possible, beyond what normal people would consider the point of reason. Which, when you then get to do a lot of the stuff I've gotten to do, you understand why their point of reason and yours seem to be entirely different. But yeah, you usually, for something like this, you do it in stages. Because, if you need at all to adjust for altitude sickness, it needs time. It needs exposure. Because you need to adjust as much as possible without reducing your ability to continue. It's tough to judge it. It's, pretty tough to do. All right. It's overly, it's overly intensive as far as effort, but it is well worth the cost when it comes to time. And when it comes to, expenditure and all of that. So quite often or at least that's how I've done it. Okay. Except for like pretty much anywhere in Afghanistan and the border, and probably over the border in some places. China, probably knows about that by now. Maybe. Probably. But anyway, except in those cases, because, well, we were chasing down bad guys. So, you want the least amount of them to escape as possible, because you want the least amount of them to come back. That said, even then, it was a little bit of a danger still, because acclimatization is still a thing, especially in freezing temps. And if you're not already a really solid individual, and this goes for everybody, even people who you would think are like, mountains, monsters of men, who end up getting knocked down because, this is their first time on mountains basically made of ice. So yeah, that's happened quite a few times. But yeah, usually you would do stuff like this in stages if you can. However, I still maintain that he screwed up as soon as he got up there. Because obviously he really wasn't, he doesn't seem like he was ready. You can have good training. You can have some preparation. But if you're not exposed to something that's at least a level directly below first, this was a bad decision from the start.
He and his Sherpa made the kind of decision that usually saves lives on mountains like Everest, K2, and of course, Annapurna. And so, how is it possible then that just a few moments later, everyone thought that Anurag was dead? You heard that right. By now, it was April 17th, 2023. Right around 2:30 p.m., Anurag and his Sherpa were descending between Camp 3 and Camp 2, and despite now being out of the death zone, just out of it, they were now approaching the most dangerous section of the climb, or the descent, a steep, icy couloir with crevasses and seracs looming above. Now, just 2 weeks earlier, a major avalanche had swept through this exact area, and luckily, no one was buried at the time, but everyone knew that this section was a death trap, a ticking time bomb, if you will, and it was even more perilous going down than it was going up. Oh, and plus, the weather was getting worse and worse. Visibility was becoming a problem. Just because they had turned around did not mean that they were anywhere close to safety yet. Now, descending at the same time as Anurag, a Brazilian climber who had also turned back before reaching the summit. He was now in front of Anurag, moving very, very carefully. Moez was the more experienced climber, and Anurag once again made a very smart decision to let him go first. They reached a section that required a short rappel about 25 feet down a steep icy wall. There was a snow anchor there with 2 ropes hanging from it, one for people and one for gear, right? The one for the people had a giant knot at the bottom of it, to stop people from rappelling any further past that point. And so Moez went first, thinking that he would kind of show Anurag the ropes. Literally. He clipped into the rope that had the knot at the end, and he rappelled down safely, stopping at that giant knot. Then
That's a horrific catastrophe waiting to happen, because if it's something that's been set there and sitting there for any length of time beyond a month, it's no longer safe. Some people might try to say, oh, well, a month isn't enough. For extreme elements like this, I'd swap out all the gear I possibly could if any of it had been exposed or in use for anything past like 2 weeks. And that's at what I consider medium use. I know what I consider, medium or easy or hard isn't exactly the norm. But for my norm, 2 weeks tops. And that's even if you take care of all your shit. A lot of people don't check their stuff or test it or put it through any type of once over, maintain it, or, maintenance. So, yeah. I'd be setting up my own shit along the way, probably, most likely. Because, I really can't trust something that's been out there for a while.
Then it was Anurag's turn. He clipped in and he started rappelling, but unlike Moez, Anurag didn't see a knot at the bottom of his rope. Because it turns out, he had grabbed the wrong rope. He was on the cargo rope used for hauling gear and equipment, not the one used for rappelling people. It was too short, and again, it had no knot at the end. Absolutely nothing to stop all the momentum he was picking up as he rappelled down. And so he began gaining more and more speed, which, if you're rappelling down an icy slope, well, that's not exactly what you want. And eventually, Anurag dropped right off the rope, hitting the hard ice below and then sliding down and down. Moez and Dawa Sherpa watched in horror as he just tumbled uncontrollably down the steep icy slope, picking up even more speed, unable to self-arrest, until after several hundred feet of sliding, he disappeared into a massive crevasse.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. Me, I attribute it probably to exhaustion and complacency. Because, well, okay, you know what? Equipment as well. Because there should be a pretty clear distinction between the two. All right? There should be a very clear distinction. Not just one has a knot and one doesn't. No, they should be different lines, different ropes, or different mechanisms for ascent. So, fuck. This part hits kind of hard because I've had similar things almost happen to people I'm with, or people I've done climbing and all of that with. Going out on missions and stuff. Sometimes you're climbing in the dark and you kind of got no choice. But that's the risk you have to take to complete the mission. But yeah, so fug. Absolute fug. Yeah. That sucks. That many feet doesn't sound like a lot. It's a good amount when you're looking down. Good enough to break your neck.
Moez and Dawa Sherpa hustled to the mouth of the crevasse, and they started shouting down to him, and they didn't hear anything back. The weather was getting worse, the avalanche danger was increasing by the second, and so Moez and the Sherpa basically had to keep moving or risk dying themselves. And that sounds harsh, but again, they were shouting to him and he wasn't responding. I mean,
most likely unconscious.
every logical sign was telling them that Anurag was gone.
Or they were in a spot, or he landed in a spot where acoustics would be completely drowned out. And I've been in similar places, right? Especially like this. And there's certain places where sound just gets swallowed up and captured. And there's other places that will reverberate everything and it rings like a bell. So yeah, I'm assuming it's that or loss of consciousness.
And so they left him behind. And again, that sounds cruel, but you have to really think here, what else could they have done? I mean, this is the harsh truth of mountaineering. When something goes wrong on one of the world's most dangerous mountains, it's essentially everyone for themselves. If you expend valuable time and energy and resources on an unplanned rescue, it's very likely that you too will end up dying. And so they did what mountaineering forces you to do in these situations, and they would have to live with that. When Moez and Dawa Sherpa reached Camp 2, they radioed all the way down to base camp, basically saying that Anurag had fallen into a crevasse and, well, we think he's dead. And for those of you that have never fallen into a crevasse, let me tell you what it's like. Or at least what it's like from what I've researched. I
was going to say, oh, no wonder he hates hiking. I've had my share of spills and falls. Thankfully, a good amount of them were when I was younger and could recover from such things more easily. Not pleasant. Not pleasant. And in certain situations, you can almost get stuck and wedged. And if you're not real strong, it'd be hard to pull yourself out. Especially in certain types of crevasse. Right? Because there could be ones where you get trapped with a leg that's just sucked in to it. And you can't move that leg, and you can't even grab up high enough to, grab onto anything or extricate yourself. Or, even if you have a line attached, you can't pull yourself out exactly. You got to get unwedged. Or in, one specific instance where one whole side of my body got trapped. So, I tried to wriggle a little bit, but I started falling, down and sideways. I started kind of sort of wiggling down towards a bit of a drop. So I stopped that. I was like, okay, maybe I can kind of, and then it was just oh no. Oh no, definitely not. So I did everything I could to get a hold of somebody. A few guys came over, dropped line down to me. They extricated me. It's a hard business. You would not, normally people would not think they could get stuck like that. They think it's kind of like a movie trope. But the honest to God truth is, it's a little hairy.
haven't either. A crevasse is a deep crack in a glacier with walls made of solid ice. The bottom is often filled with snow and debris from previous avalanches. And when you fall into one, which is basically my worst nightmare, by the way, the impact is most likely going to kill you. But if you're lucky or perhaps unlucky enough to survive, then you're most likely going to break bones, experience extreme trauma and internal bleeding and external bleeding, and then you're going to die. But
luckily for me, it wasn't too terribly far I fell. And, most of the gear I was wearing took the brunt of impact for pretty much everything. Thank God for that. Right. But yeah, thankfully for me, the vast majority of anything I've fallen into is shallow in comparison to this bullshit. And that by itself actually could kill you if you land wrong. Thankfully, I am very head shy. So, so me, I'm like, oh, fuck. I, I want to land anywhere but my head. Doesn't matter where from. Unless I have no control over it, in which case, usually I'm unconscious. But anyway, MTBIs. A lot of them. Apparently. That said, still very dangerous, especially if nobody knows you fell or nobody knows where you are when you fell. So yeah, it's a huge thing to ensure people know your location or they know whereabouts you're going. In some cases, like the terrain's so dense and rough that when you do like your clover leaf and you're checking out your surroundings to see where you're going to settle, you make sure everybody knows where everything is at and everybody make, sector sketches and all that shit, right? To make sure that y'all are familiar with the terrain. So if I tell you, hey, I'm going like 50 meters that way and I'm going to go dig a hole and then do my business, if I'm not back in like 10 minutes, come check on me. Okay, going this way, this direction, blah, 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 right? Because in some places, even with good short range comms, you can still lose comms. And so, in some cases, you carry a pen flare or a whistle. In a few circumstances, a whistle, just in case, right? As an emergency measure, because you want to make as little noise as possible if the enemy's nearby. Unless you plan on them coming to you or you plan on stomping them flat, then you don't want to care. Or you want the element of surprise. I'm going off on tangents because the grunt in me just won't die. That said, right, it's happened to me a time or two. Some of my worst luck has been on mountains. But thankfully the majority of my time, on mountains and in adverse terrain, I've either been extremely lucky, fortunate, blessed, or something. Because, the typical bad things have happened to me. Thankfully, I survived them all. Thus, I'm here now. So, yeah.
But if you survive the fall and somehow you're still conscious, well, you're faced with a brand new nightmare, which is you're trapped. Like, how are you going to get out? That was the reality that Anurag faced when he came to moments after he was left behind. He didn't die. He awoke in the crevasse after being unconscious for quite some time and immediately recognized the situation that he had quite literally landed in. He began assessing the walls surrounding him, and they were way too slippery and icy for him to climb out of. And then he assessed his injuries. Now, he was hurt, obviously, but he wasn't hurt like critically. His best chances were to stay put and then just pray that rescue would come, which sounds like a simple plan, but of course, when you're stuck down there, that is way easier said than done. He didn't have much in terms of rations. He didn't have a radio. He barely had anything, but he did have a GoPro. We'll come back to that. And even though the crevasse was slightly warmer than like the outside face of the mountain, since it was protected from the wind, well, it was still well below freezing, which meant that hypothermia and frostbite were not just a possibility, but pretty much inevitable at some point.
Everybody had radios. I'm talking about my experiences. Everybody. Everyone. And whistles. Just in case. Just in case, right? Because at the very least, what you could do is with a whistle, you can make more than enough noise depending on where you've landed. Because, like I said, some places swallow sound. They just eat it. Horrible acoustics. And in some places, you can whistle once and you'll hear it for freaking eternity, it seems like. But yeah, that said, everybody had radios. Always. No exceptions.
Point. Anurag knew that he would be in for the fight of his life, essentially.
Oh, yeah, and lots of snacks. So something we used to do, right, is that in our cargo pockets, we'd have what we call lickies and chewies, or pogie bait, right? So like a bag of beef jerky, and then a shit ton of dried, non-perishable snacks in the other cargo pocket, a tourniquet in another like boot pocket essentially. Well, bottom blouse pocket, whatever. And then, me, like having an inner fat kid, I'd have an extra pouch that would be attached directly to my belt that would be right behind me that would be full of more non-perishable, non-crushable types of eaty goodies. You know what I'm saying? So I'd have more than enough rations to last me like a week by myself if that's all I had. I'm talking about rationing, though. Although it's still pretty good meals. Love that shit. But yeah. And then on top of that, a pen flare. So a pen flare, tiny. Real tiny. Like maybe barely even the size of my index finger. About that long. And you can carry about 5 flares per pen flare in the same exact pocket and everything. I always had one preloaded just in case. That way all I had to do was and just all right, and then day or night someone, if they're close enough, would easily be able to find me from that. And then make noise with the whistle just in case. So that said, I you know what? Actually, this actually makes some sense because we're trained to be hyper vigilant, hyper aware, and hyper paranoid, and hyper cautious. Now, there's some exceptions to this rule. All right, I did a video recently on Operation Red Wing. With the lone survivor and everything. Fog, right? Hearing about it at all is just enough to make the skin crawl. That said, I was always overly prepared whenever I could be, every time I can. Just saying. Plus, extra rope never really hurts, or at least some 550 cord. 550 cord, you have an E-tool on you. And an E-tool, you fold it up. It's a shovel. Basically a trench shovel, just foldable. I like the Gerber one because it's real solid. And not to mention, real good in a fight if you need it. But also, with that sucker, you could use it to escape things as well. And then sometimes I carry an extra hook or two. But anyway, let's continue. I'm ranting and raving too much. But, okay, you get the point. I was always overly prepared.
Actually, most people who fall into crevasses and don't die right away will still die within hours. All that Anurag could do was just try to outlast the mountain, which almost always is a losing proposition. Meanwhile, back in India, Anurag's family was in hell. His brothers, Ashish Malu and Sudhir Malu, well, they got the call on April 17th. It was assumed that their brother was dead, though the Malu family did hold on to a sliver of hope because there had been no official confirmation yet, which is great and all, but I do want to stress that this was just a sliver, right?
That's about average, honestly. Very few people are able to just completely and totally, give it up to the universe, essentially, or give it up to God, whatever. Very few people can do that. I know I'm not one of those. If I'm unable to get confirmation, then I won't be able to rest. It'd be impossible, actually. I am retard. I have returned. I almost mixed up retard and returned. Returned? Actually, it just sounds like an accent. That doesn't make... Well, anyway, let's continue.
Everyone on the mountain was already privately mourning the loss of Anurag. Initial search efforts were being crushed by the continued terrible weather. Helicopters couldn't fly anywhere near the area where he fell, and ground teams couldn't even safely approach the area because of the avalanche risk. After 24 hours, pretty much everyone had given up hope. However, back in India, there were two people that refused to accept this reality. And that, of course, was Anurag's brothers. Ashish would end up launching an online petition on change.org, desperately urging the Nepalese and Indian governments to continue the search and continue trying to rescue their brother. The petition read, quote, "We know that Anurag is out there somewhere waiting for us. Help us find him by signing and sharing this petition."
Pay me 500 grand. I'll go look for him. That's not even a joke either. And I would be taking my painstaking time to do so. Right. And then to effect recovery of a body, you need some pretty specialized gear you'll have to carry with you. And the means for which to effect recovery of the body. It's a real painstaking process. There's so much preparation. There's so much that goes into it. It's time intensive. It's time consuming. Resource intensive, resource consuming in some cases. It's possible, depending on the situation, on part and mostly in the whole, but it is possible. All right, so yeah. Anyway, but yeah, if I got paid 500 grand, I'd go look for them.
And that's super admirable, but the reality is that the brothers didn't actually know if he was alive or dead at this point. All they knew is that there was a chance he was still alive, and no matter how small that chance was, it was worth fighting for. What the brothers couldn't have known at this time was that, well, their hunch was right. Anurag was not only alive, but he was actually conscious. And that's when he pressed record for the first time on his GoPro.
Hello. Really praying and hoping someone would come and rescue me.
Anurag would continue recording videos for his family, videos that, to my knowledge, have never surfaced publicly. But we know that in these videos, he was telling his family he loved them, that he would miss them, and he was just praying that someone would rescue him somehow. He was lying on his right side in like a fetal position, the body's natural response to extreme cold. His body was trying to conserve heat and essentially keep his core organs alive. The crevasse did protect him from the wind, which was good. And don't get me wrong, it was still well below freezing in that crevasse. But all this meant was that Anurag wouldn't freeze to death quickly,
I wonder... Damn it, I don't want to have to replay the video a billion times. Fuck. This is better for our live stream, but nobody watches my live streams.
Come and rescue me.
All right, it looks like... actually there might have been some powder there. So a neat little trick you could pull off, right, when it comes to like glaciers and snow and ice or whatever, is that what you want to try to do is that, especially if you're in something similar to this, which I have been, thankfully not directly this, or I'd probably have been retired early because that shit would suck. Similar to this, not exact, similar. And what you want to do is that you want to assess what is your up, down, right, and left. Okay, and you can kind of tell this if you're standing up straight. If you close your eyes and you're standing up straight, you feel kind of weird and wobbly, right? Pretty much anyone can do this in the comfort of their own home, thankfully. But you feel kind of weird and wobbly unless you're a real solid person. Your normal people don't have a natural, easily recoverable, or easily maintained center of balance, right? And how you determine what's up, down, right, left is that you kind of close your eyes and you get a feel for the environment as much as you can and as quickly as you can, because you want to have your eyes closed for too long. You don't know what's out there. And you try to figure out what your up and down is. And what I mean by that is, what is your angle, right? From here, it looks like he's probably at the deepest depression of the crevasse. It doesn't really look like, I don't know. To me, it doesn't look unassailable. To me. All right. I'm not sure about him. To me, it doesn't look unassailable entirely. But that ship be slippery, so he could fall a few times. Then again, I'm the kind of guy who brought, like, all sorts of shit just in case I needed to climb anywhere, period. So attached to me would be a lot of shit, as I was explaining earlier, with how overly cautious and paranoid about everything I am, and always have been. I'd have a lot of different shit on me to be able to get out of something like this, or to affect my recovery and survival, right? So one of the cool things about powdery stuff and snow is that he seems like he's already out of the wind. Okay. Now this isn't foolproof, and it's not going to work for exactly pretty much everybody. If you are not prepared for the worst possible extremes, you're going to be found lacking in some way. So that said, what's cool about this is that you can igloo the shit out of yourself. Or ice cave yourself, right? So dig into the side of it. If there's plenty of real thick, nice powder, you could dig yourself through into the side of something, create yourself a little like cave area to crawl yourself into. Okay, and then what's cool is that as you compact it all and you make it super dense, you basically create like your own little ice shelf within the ice shelf within the ice shelf. And you make it super compact all the way around, but you don't want it to be too big. You want it to be just close enough, but just far enough away to where if some other fresh powder falls in, you're not just stuck there. You have room to maneuver and beat your way out of the shit that might get stuck on top of you. That said, you can compact yourself well enough to where it will actually help to retain a maximal amount of body heat. Crazy, right? You can even get steamy if you do it right. Especially if you're wearing the right shit. That said, I am unsure of whether or not he is wearing the right shit. That's a discussion for another time if there ever is one. But yeah, and then you can make yourself a nice little cave you can crawl into to retain the greater amount of body heat possible. You'll still lose some, but in some instances where I've done this, and we're talking like negative 50 degrees, in some cases negative 60. And I've done this, and it actually got warm enough for me to sleep. I'm not joking about that. I was shocked as fuck when I learned all this shit too. I was like, what? Heat in the snow? What are you talking about? But anyway, that's one thing you can do. Another is basically like, kind of like, it's climbing. But if everything's loose enough and not too terribly slippery, it's time intensive again. And you gotta be you gotta be in some pretty good shape for this. Or super light and in shape. But you gotta be in real good shape. You gotta be able to climb. And I'm talking not just trees. I'm saying you gotta be able to climb. In some instances, if there is true, like, just freshly melted shit, you can use it to create your own anchors. So if you're warm enough and hot enough, or you got the proper type of gloves on or something, right? And there's certain types of gloves you can get that you can use to kind of get some grip in, like, ice or snow or water. Real cool shit. Although they're not the best combat gloves. They're not. They're really not. But anyway, that said, depending on what angle, where you are, and how you are. And if you got real good, strong hands, what you can do is that you can get to a grip site, right, where you'll have the maximum amount of leverage and dig. And dig. And you don't want to dig a cup. You want to dig a handhold. And you want to dig and dig and dig. And you want to keep doing that. You want to compact it. You want to make sure it's all nice and, bunched and clumped up. Kind of like you're making I don't know how many people are familiar with like climbing walls. All right, where you see them like sometimes, people see them sometimes in videos, I think. For people, wait, there's one with Jason Momoa. That'll help to spread the word better. Jason Momoa was climbing like 2 feet off the ground on one of these things. But anyway, they already have these custom made grips and shit, right? You're basically doing that on the spot. And you're digging. How I know? I've done this shit. It was tedious, monotonous, but it had to be done. It had to be done. All right. It's one of the rare instances I had to affect, my own recovery in a way. So you dig, and you make sure that you give plenty of time for that shit to solidify. All right. And you could tell, because if you test it out every once in a while, without just scraping everything off, of course, once you test it out every once in a while, over time it's going to get solid enough to almost be like rock. And then you got yourself a nice like handhold that you're able to get some leverage on. All right. You don't want to do this. All right. You don't want to do this because little cuppy things can slip. You want multiple different grips, kind of like your fingers doing a claw, right? And that will be much more effective, especially since you can kind of rest different areas on your hand and your forearm, because you're going to get tired as fuck doing this shit. I mean, I did, and I'm a pretty solid built dude already. All right. But yeah, and that's another way you can affect your own kind of recovery. Trouble is, in some areas, you might accidentally hit some spots where it's a little weak. You do make it. You are climbing up, and then that shit just breaks. And then, thankfully, you have the other hand already, like, up there, like, grabbing some shit, right? So, thankfully, you're already prepped and ready. And if that thing breaks, then you're not entirely falling off. God, it sucks. Because you got to do the same thing with all 4 limbs. And I'm serious. All 4. It's not just create one, then create the other, and just use your arms to climb up like you're doing a real screwed up freaking, Jacob's ladder. Okay? You got to do it for your feet, too. And thankfully, the type of boots I was wearing were perfect for this. Still was a big, giant pain in the ass, even with the crimps I had on. Because even with boots that are meant for climbing, you want crimps. And quite often for like ice or something, you want to carry extra types with you in case you snap something or break something, or in case, the other crimps fail. All right, but you want some boot spikes of some kind, guaranteed. You want them to be like the clamp-ons, okay? And even with all those, ungodly difficult. All right, that was one of the many times in my life, okay, which thankfully were few and far in between over how long I've lived, where I literally was like, God, can you just take me now? you do some soul searching in that kind of shit. Anyway, that being said, all right, stupid long tangent aside, there's many different ways to affect rescue and recovery, or failing that long-term survival. And the greater amount of it has to do with the Batman method, which is, prep work. Prep time. Anyway, let's continue. This video is stupid fucking long enough. Nobody's watching this shit.
Anurag would continue recording videos for his family, videos that, to my knowledge, have never surfaced publicly. But we know that in these videos, he was telling his family he loved them, that he would miss them, and he was just praying that someone would rescue him somehow. He was lying on his right side in like a fetal position, the body's natural response to extreme cold. His body was trying to conserve heat and essentially keep his core organs alive. The crevasse did protect him from the wind, which was good. And don't get me wrong, first of all, his location. Two more, it would still happen, but it would happen a lot. He's to death in that crevasse, it would still happen, but it would happen a lot slower. However, there were two more things that Anurag had going for him. First of all, his location. Not the crevasse part, that was obviously not a benefit, but rather the altitude. Like I said earlier, he wasn't in the death zone anymore. He was actually about 2,000 meters lower, and remember, he didn't bring any supplemental oxygen with him. If he had fallen even just like 1,000 meters higher, he would have passed out from the lack of oxygen within just a few hours and almost certainly would have died within the first 24 hours. You also have to remember that Anurag was in peak physical condition from all of the months of training he had put in. His body could last way longer than just like your average person. And so as the situation got more extreme, his body would respond kind of in the way that like a wild animal would. His body temperature would drop, his metabolism slowed, and his heart rate slowly decreased. He was experiencing hypothermia, and weirdly, this put his body into sort of like a hibernation mode. Hypothermia is not good, but what was happening did kind of protect his organs by requiring less oxygen. All of that stuff basically prolonged his life in that crevasse by a couple days, but that was pretty much it. I mean, humans aren't built to hibernate after all, and so with each passing hour, his odds of survival dramatically decreased. And even if he was somehow able to survive, it was almost guaranteed that he would be like seriously and permanently injured, right? On the third day of being stuck in the crevasse, Anurag's GoPro battery died. Not that he was really in any shape to make videos at this point. He was exhausted. He was starving, dehydrated, and shortly after his GoPro lost battery, well, so did Anurag's brain. He fully lost consciousness, and fresh snow falling into the crevasse started to bury his body. This blanket of snow all but sealed his fate, and again, this is the reality of Annapurna. It's nicknamed the Killer Mountain, but in this case, it wasn't just going to kill Anurag, it was going to erase him entirely. However, there was one factor that Annapurna wasn't accounting for, and that was the petition on change.org. His brothers had made that petition out of pure desperation, almost like this
Okay, I gotta check to see what the dogs are barking at. His freaking huskies being some annoying bitches. All right, let's continue.
Probably won't work, but what do we really have to lose? But what they didn't expect was that thousands of people would sign it. And not just like everyday random people or like Facebook moms, but like very powerful people. People who even had governmental connections. Even the CEO of Apple. You have to remember that Anurag was not a thrill seeker. He built his life around helping people, and now people really wanted to help him. Within a day of Anurag's...
It's a rarity this kind of thing happens. Especially in these circles. It's still a rarity. Right? I mean, it's cool. Great. Awesome. But a rarity. So never be banking on this shit. Never. All right. Cool it happened. Well, okay, unfortunate because he died anyway. But cool it happened. But it's a rarity to begin with. And it's already an extreme rarity. And then it's a rarity among this community too.
Disappearance, the Indian government got word of the petition and became involved, helping the Nepalese government authorize and organize a rescue operation. 7 Summits treks The expedition company who took Honorog up the mountain would be coordinating rescue efforts from base camp. However, this is way easier on paper than it actually is in reality. They needed specialists to assist with this rescue. They needed expert climbers who knew how to perform a crevasse rescue at high altitude in an active avalanche zone. And this was a talent pool that was very few and far between. And plus, whoever they ended up getting had to be available during the peak climbing season. But pretty quickly, things started to come together, and then fate had one more card to play, and it came in the form of one name, Adam Bialeski. And let me tell you about this dude. Adam Bialeski is a Polish mountaineer, and he's known for being one of the best high-altitude climbers in the entire world.
Slavs are already a hard type of people. Slavic mountaineer? Not a surprise.
He summited multiple 8,000 meter peaks. He's done first ascents up routes that had never been climbed before. He's even climbed some of these mountains in the winter when the conditions are at their most brutal. And he's also a rescuer with experience saving lives on mountains like K2, climbing through blizzards to rescue people in complete darkness. And luckily, guess who happened to be
Sounds exactly like my kind of man.
at Annapurna base camp already when all this was going down? That's right. Adam, as well as his climbing partner, Mariusz Hatala, well, they were already there, hoping to attempt a new route on the mountain's northwest face, and for weeks, they had just been kind of waiting for the perfect weather window to do this. They waited so long that by April 19th, 2023, they were among the very few climbers that were even left at base camp. And so they were kind of just waiting around and resting when all of a sudden the founder of Seven Summit Treks unzipped their tent and started pleading with them to help with Honorog's rescue, or perhaps his body recovery. And Adam and Mariusz did not hesitate. There was a chance that Honorog was still alive after all, and even just that small chance was enough to convince them to leap into action. And so on the early morning of April 20th, the rescue team assembled at base camp, led by Adam and Mariusz with the help of several Sherpas and a helicopter pilot. They had one mission, and that was to retrieve Honorog, dead or alive. But even with the best talent in the world at something like this, the rescue was a lot easier said than done.
No matter which way, you can have the best people imaginable. And I've known guys that put anyone in the public you would ever meet down a few pegs. All right. And I could never measure up to him. Okay. If you were to compare me to, like, anybody trained in the military, I was average. At best, I think. Okay. That's my summation. Because I've met some really amazing individuals. People whom you'll never hear about. You'll never know them. Okay, maybe a few you might or might not really sure yet. It's been some years now. But I've known a lot of guys like that who would make the absolute best record holders just look like absolutely nothing. And it's crazy these people exist and that they exist in certain numbers. I just got lucky to meet a few. And to have served alongside them. And even with all these people, there have been some of those who unfortunately are unrecoverable. Or amongst the few instances where things were deadly, catastrophe struck. Even with the highest caliber human beings possible. Especially for this. Beyond what you know of. Period. Too late. Unfortunately. Too late. And there's even rarer instances where recovery was literally impossible. Until we regroup. That said, you can have the best people on the planet, but the elements take no prisoners and give no mercy.
Crevasse rescues at high altitude are extremely rare, and they're obviously extremely dangerous. Most climbing teams don't have the technical expertise to pull them off, and also add in the fact that they're doing this in an active avalanche zone. Well, the truth is that most rescuers wouldn't even attempt this, especially given how unlikely it was that Anurag was still alive. I mean, most rescuers would just assume that they're recovering a body at this point, and so, why not wait until the weather and the conditions are much safer? However, again, Anurag's family was convinced that he could still be alive up there, and so that put a sense of urgency into all of these rescuers. They flew from base camp up to Camp 2 in helicopters, and then from that point, the helicopter could only carry 1 or 2 people at a time because of the altitude. Finding landing spots in these conditions was nearly impossible. The pilot would barely touch the ground and then yell, "Jump out," and the climbers would kind of just leap onto the slope. Ultimately, it took about 3 flights to even just get everyone up there. From the helicopter landing zone, it took about 20 to 30 minutes of careful and highly technical climbing to reach the crevasse. Remember, this was the most dangerous and difficult area of the route. Steep ice, loose snow, falling rocks. And in case you forgot, which you probably haven't, I've said it 7 times now, this whole section is an extremely active avalanche zone. But miraculously, they all safely reach the mouth of the crevasse, and that's when reality set in. They kind of looked down into it, and maybe they had underestimated how deep the crack went, but at this point, they were now realizing that it was over 250 feet deep. They're straining their eyes, looking down as far as they can, and then they finally made out what looked like a dark yellow shape covered in white snow. And of course, they knew that this was Anurag's body. They called down to him, hoping to hear something in response, something to indicate he was still alive down there, but they did not hear anything back. Anurag was now unconscious, and no sounds that they could make, no yelling down to him, none of that was going to be enough to have him come to. And so, understandably, the rescuers probably assumed that it was too late. I mean, losing consciousness while stuck in a crevasse on one of the world's most dangerous mountains, that's probably one of the surest signs that you're done for, right? But still, they had come all this way, and Mariusz instructed the Sherpa team to set up a complex rope system, a pulley contraption with multiple anchors and safety lines.
Okay, so there is someone else who uses such things. Okay, just making sure. I very rarely hear much about people doing stuff like this. I don't know if they've got. I don't know if they got chain, right? But if they got more than enough rope to spare to ensure it's all good, knock on wood, then it can work out the same. It's still kind of difficult. That being said, let's continue.
Adam and a Sherpa prepared to rappel down, and they were prepared.
But yeah, I cannot. It's actually kind of nice to hear other people use this. All right. Anyway, I'm a little relieved by that, so that's cool.
Prepared for body recovery, essentially meaning they were going to be hauling up dead weight, as bad as that sounds. Adam clipped into the rope and then slowly started descending into the crevasse. The slick walls of the crevasse were closing in on him as the further he got, jagged ice on both sides, narrow passages. It's like claustrophobia on steroids. And so he had to maneuver carefully to avoid getting stuck himself. And of course, if his rope somehow severed, well, then he was almost certainly done for. After what felt like hours, but was most likely only a couple minutes, Adam reached the bottom of the crevasse. They were far from celebrating yet because there, at the bottom, was Anurag Maloo lying on his right side in like a fetal position. There's no other way to say it. It looked like a corpse. There was no body movement whatsoever. He was also buried in snow because, it had been days since he had had the strength to even uncover the snow off of himself. None of this indicates that he was going to be alive. So Adam approached Anurag's body and he brushed away the snow from his face to check for breathing.
So, about the dead weight thing, I had a battle buddy tell me about, and this was when I first got in the Army. So he had already gone and done stuff before I did. Some real serious stuff. And he told me a joke about dead weight. This is what got triggered into my macabre brain. My very morbid, dark humor. All right? It's probably where I got it from. Well, that or the ghetto. Whatever, one of the two. And he said to me, he was like, when you're carrying something, you know how you know they died? And I was like, no, how? And he was like, they become dead weight. And I was like, what? What? I was like, what? And all we were doing at that point in time, because we were doing physical training. Okay, we were running straight uphill. It was just about like almost a 45-degree ascent. Running uphill. All right, and we had to carry each other. He was a big boy. All right, quite a bit bigger than me. Okay, a full foot taller and larger. Goddamn football player, though. Holy Jesus, was he strong. Okay, I'm a tough guy. I'm pretty strong myself, okay? I can freaking, I can chuck 180 pounds over my head with one arm. I can still do it. Still got it. Although recovery sucks. Don't get old. That said, okay, he could chuck someone like me around like nothing, and my average weight's about 200. And he could just one arm just grab me and throw me over his shoulder and just go. Me, I had to do like a full fireman carry and just it sucked. Real effective training though. But yeah, like and that's what we were doing. We were carrying each other, like a mile up the freaking hill. Okay, and then we had to crawl back down. It sucked. But anyway, fun though. It was a fun suck. Okay? I'm not even going to address that. That said, it was that's when he said dead weight, that's immediately what I thought of. I was like, what the But it's true. It's true to an extent. Because as someone who's chucked around, his fair share of bodies and corpses, someone unconscious and someone dead are a category of weight all in their own.
But before he could even hear a breath, Adam noticed something else. Anurag's eyes reacted to the light. His body shivered. A single, low, shallow breath emerged. Folks, it turns out that Anurag's brothers were right. Everyone who had signed the petition was right. Anurag Maloo somehow was alive. Adam shouted the news up to the crew, who obviously rejoiced, but any celebration had to be cut short pretty much immediately because even though he was alive, Anurag was still in bad shape.
Okay, I thought he died. Was I wrong? Well, I mean, cool if I'm wrong. That's great. still. Something tells me the other shoe is yet to drop.
He was basically unconscious, hypothermic, and severely frostbitten. His lips had turned blue. I mean, his body was basically on the verge of shutting down for good. He was laying there on death's door, and frankly, he was about to pass right through it. There was literally no time to wait. They had to get him out of the crevasse right now. And folks, I know that this almost sounds like an action movie. I promise I'm trying not to over dramatize it. This is all true. And I know it's all true because, well, we have the footage. This is a clip, an actual clip from Adam's GoPro of the rescue. You can literally see them rappelling Anurag up the crevasse. And I don't know about you, but Anurag basically looks like, just dead weight here. However, I guess there was enough proof of life that they really believed he had a chance of surviving this. And so they used the pulley system to hoist him up, while Adam used himself as a counterweight.
Pretty much same thing I've used. It's really not all that different, except I would have extras for redundancy. And also that way, also if you set up the pulleys a certain way and you have a wedge, right? And then you got counterweight on the opposite side of all of this and not just an anchor, you can affect recovery much faster and much quicker. You're not slowly just inching your way up and just, you can get it done pretty quick. It does take a bit extra, but I feel like it's worth it, honestly. But yeah, it's really cool to see it implemented, outside of the military. So real neat. Now, when's this other shoe going to drop? Because I feel like there's another shoe that's about to drop.
It took over an hour for them to slowly pull Anurag out of there. And when Adam finally reached the surface with Anurag's almost lifeless body, the team of Sherpas worked fast. They strapped Anurag into a rescue harness and they loaded him onto the helicopter, which fast-tracked him back down to base camp for a bit more prep work and then ultimately on to the hospital. Chang Dawa Sherpa, who was up there helping the entire time, would later call this a 1 in a million rescue. However, the story is not over yet because getting Anurag out of the crevasse was only step 2. He may have escaped the mountain, but it wasn't done trying to kill him yet. And as if this story wasn't already insane enough, step 3 proved to be the most hellish of all, and it started with 3 words: dead on arrival. Imagine pulling off this miraculous 1 in a million rescue just to hear those 3 words once Anurag gets to the hospital. And by the way, this wasn't just like a normal hospital. They actually ended up bringing him to a smaller hospital, like not the one in Kathmandu where, you would hope someone needing urgent medical care would go. Because Anurag was pretty much on his last breaths, they basically had no choice but to bring him to the closest hospital. And as soon as doctors took a look at him, he was declared dead on arrival. He didn't have a pulse, he wasn't breathing anymore, and his body temperature was critically low. He had severe hypothermia, frostbite all over his hands and arms and feet. He was, by all definitions, gone. And
I don't know if I'm trusting them doctors on this. I mean, yeah, it could happen. It does happen. Shit happens quite often, right? But I'm having a hard time accepting that part. Because, what kind of hospital? The only one I'm familiar with is Kathmandu. That's it. I didn't know there was another one out there. So what was the capacity? What was the level of experience, training, education? What were they operating with there? That would be my question. right? Let's say I was assigned as like the investigative NCO for something similar to this that happened, I don't know, during training or some shit, right? And I'm assigned alongside an officer. I go and do some groundwork, and he goes and does a lot of freaking interviews and questioning and putting together a big picture, and I go run around doing the beat feet thing, right? uh if I was the investigating NCO, all right, I'd check out this hospital with a fine tooth comb. I'd be like the meme, scene from Spaceballs, where they're quite literally taking a giant comb through the desert, and it's hot as fuck. And that's what I'd be doing. I could not rest until I got every single bit of data and information and all that shit I could possibly think of. Fuck, I'd probably get there with half the list like already made up to check off. All right, because there's no direct SOP period for this. It always comes down to who, what, where, when, why. And you got to do that per individual. You got to do that per, let's say they got recording. Then you got to do it for the recording, for each scene of the recording, who, what, where, when, why, who, what, where, when, why, who, what, where, when, why. All right. Shit, I still keep notebook and paper nearby with a pen all the fucking time, even though half the time I don't fucking need it. But you never know. You never know. My right in the reins in my assault bag. But it'd be a lot of tedium. It'd be monotonous as hell. All right, but it must be done. No different from a battle damage assessment, right? No different than a recon. Complacency kills. I would want to know, no matter who it was, I don't care if they're the most famous doctor on planet Earth and they've saved everyone they've ever come into contact with except for this one individual. They're getting the full treatment too. I would want to know what they were working with at that smaller hospital. Because in my experience, at smaller hospitals, quite often, they are not exactly prepared for the worst case scenarios. It could just be my experience. It could just be, me having been to certain places, right, where they don't exactly expect that kind of thing as a regular occurrence. Or they just don't have the resources, or they just don't have it, right? Or in some places where their equivalent to a doctor is our equivalent of a nurse. So, I mean, I got some questions for that one, but anyway, let's continue.
Look, this would have probably been a rational ending to the story, a sad one, but it would make sense. Someone who fought against the elements and stayed alive for as long as he possibly could before eventually succumbing to injury and the bitter cold and dying. All of that heroism, from the petition to Adam's rescue, well, as honorable as that stuff was, it was going to be for nothing. But at least they tried, right? Remember, this is the Killer Mountain after all. 1 in 3 people don't make it. But Anurag's brother, Ashish, who had flown to Nepal from India, was sitting there at the hospital and he refused to accept that his brother was now just going to be another statistic. Adam's team had pulled Anurag out from the crevasse and he was alive back then, so surely he still had a chance of being brought back to life now. And so Ashish begged the attending physician, Dr. Asim Subaidi, to start performing CPR on Anurag. And to his credit, Dr. Subaidi agreed. And so he started CPR. He did it for an hour and there was still no pulse. But he kept going. 2 hours, still no pulse. Let's try 3 hours. 3 hours of CPR and still nothing. Most medical protocols say that if CPR doesn't work after like 30 to 60 minutes, then the patient is essentially gone. But Dr. Subaidi kept going.
Well, then again, most medical protocols throughout the world are bare bones at best. And there's a reason why Okay, I mean, even with all of our issues with medical care and health care and all that shit, there's a reason why in the Western world the number of like absolute mortalities is incredibly low, even with all the shit we gotta deal with. Period. It's still very low. Why? Well, okay. I mean, recently it's fallen off a lot because they were just giving out people like, you know, giving people their fucking MD like candy just because they were, a different skin color than me. Oh, hey, you got D's on everything, and hell, you didn't even show up to half the classes. But you know what? Here's your DEI award. You got your MD now. Now go be a doctor. Fucking bullshit. Anyway, but up until this point, there's been a reason why. Okay, that we have such as we do. Because we used to have an extreme standard. Extreme. I mean, when I did all my medical stuff, I was just training strictly to try to keep people alive out in the field and stabilize them. So that they could get to at least a field hospital or at least get to, well, okay, we call them aid stations now. But to get to an aid station and then get flown the fuck out and sent somewhere where they got serious, actual, like lifelong doctors to, well, literally make sure they stay alive. Okay, I can keep someone stable. I can do quite a bit within my capacity. And that was just me doing a hyper condensed training timeline of about 9 months. Fuck, was that hard. But very useful. It's helped me out a lot personally as well. And my family. Well, my son. That said, still does not at all compare to, the real doctors we still have today. Everywhere else in the world, it's not the same. Sometimes they've even been to the same places. All right, uh, um, they've been to the same medical schools and all that shit. They've been to Western medical schools. Trouble is that the greater majority outside the U.S., outside the Western world, outside of the, highly high, just stupendously high standard, that we got, or used to have, not sure anymore. Well, it just does not compare. And yes, I've been somewhat subject to very limited necessary medical care outside the United States of America. So yeah, another thing or two about it. Are there quite a few places that do have some things up to par? Absolutely. 100%. There are some, and some will probably talk about them. And then they'll anecdotally think that's everywhere. That's actually not the case at all. Not at all. But medical standards outside the Western world and inside the Western world, different orders of magnitude entirely on average. That said, let's continue.
They hit 4 hours of CPR, and at this point, Dr. Subaidi basically told Anurag's family that even if he did somehow come out of this with a pulse, he would most likely be like severely impaired for the rest of his life. Maybe he would never walk again or speak again, or even have no brain function. However, Anurag's family asked to continue CPR for just 1 more hour.
Brain damage due to lack of oxygen. So, I've almost suffered from this a few times. Thus, I can literally claim, status of basic retard to a certain degree. And I've had TBIs as well. So, my brain has taken a real beating. Directly. In a lot of cases, very literally. That said, again, it does do a number on you. And if you have any level of self-awareness, you can actually tell the difference. It sucks. Big time. It sucks really hard. And there's really not too much you could do about it. And it's happened to me a couple of times. I've also had a stroke. Sometimes people can tell. Sometimes. And recently had they either think it was an aneurysm or a dissection. Right? It's where there's like, well, anyway, people will look that up and figure it out anyway. Okay, I've had. So anyway, that said, brain damage due to lack of oxygen. It's not good at all. However, there is a good amount of people who experience a bare minimal compared to myself and this guy. And they come out just fine. In fact, I've helped with quite a few of them. Okay. And then there's been some times where shit went down and, I had a poor PFC doing CLS on his battle buddy for, shoot, it must have been like almost 2 hours straight. We were stuck there for a hot minute before help arrived. We needed QRF. Oh God, that was a terrible one. That was a hard tick. I mean, we won in the end, okay? I'm pretty sure we got them all. But anyway, we did take casualties. And I had a poor PFC, trying to get his, trying to bring his buddy back. And, I told him, hey, like, only continue so long as you can. And I said that very deliberately to him because, well, God did seem like he was gone. And I had other people to triage. So, essentially, SOP was make sure the living stay alive, prepare to bury the dead. But still try. That's essentially how it went. Dude must have been doing it for like 2 hours, 3 hours maybe. And me, like, I was like, I look, I already took some tape, wrote the time on the bottom of his boot approximately, and I just let him keep going because everything else was already handled. I had other guys there too. Motherfucker woke up on the goddamn bird. Fucking ridiculous. He woke up on the bird. I didn't get a pulse. I didn't get no response. Nothing. Everything, absolutely everything was tried. Okay, including that freaking chest pump thing. Even the valves, nothing worked. And then on the bird, he woke up. And when I finally got on one to get the fuck out of there, I heard about it while I was going, and I was like, fuck. I mean, I was relieved, but at the same time, I was like, shit. Oh, thankfully he didn't remember much. Thankfully. But anyway, let's continue. But yeah, I mean, it does happen. Sometimes people who seem like they're perfectly fine when they leave die on the bird. Right? Had that happen to a sergeant first class. He got on the bird. He was stable. Okay. There was no signs that he should have. There's no signs he should have died on his way there. He should have made it there. You know, everything was going well. Well, 32 arrival, okay, was about the approximate time that they were like, so yeah, just some of the wackiest ass shit ever can, will, and does happen. Thus, it's a universal law. Anything that can, will, and does happen. Murphy's Law is actually pretty good to abide by.
After this 5th hour passed, well, at that point they would call it. And I'm no doctor, but my understanding is that this is pretty unusual. Like, CPR rarely goes beyond a couple of hours, let alone 4 or 5. Dr. Subaidi was kind of risking a lot here. He was going against medical norms, exhausting his staff, and maybe most heartbreakingly, providing a lot of false hope to Anurag's family. But speaking of them, apparently a psychic had told Anurag's family that he would awake within 5 hours. And in a later interview, Dr. Subaidi said, quote, "Though I am a student of science, I believe in miracles."
Hard not to if you've experienced stuff, you know, that seems miraculous. Hell, my fucking existence. Why the hell can I survive everything in war? Period. Everything. Yes, all of it. Been blown up. All right. I've taken rounds to the plates. You know. And then on top of that, like, dude. Freaking had my freaking iPro shot off my face. All right. Had mortar rounds land close by. Sometimes a few at a time. Had RPGs skip off my shit while I was in the turret. Fuck. Had rounds hit them plates. All right. I've taken a round to one of my brain buckets, to one of my K-pots. You know, back when we had Mitches. ACH came immediately afterwards, though. Good, solid one. Pretty good. You know, friggin', you know, all of it. Almost burned alive. That wasn't fun. Fuck the dudes that made the cheap ass armor for them Humvees. Making it out of that shit? Fucking bullshit. We almost got cooked alive. My buddy was burning beneath me. But somehow got through it all. Probably by probably by the grace of God. Probably. What for? I can't say. I'm a nobody. Literally. A nobody. Nobody important. I'm not smart. People think I'm smart just because I know a lot of things. That does not equate smartness. I've learned most everything the hard way. You know, I've hit my head a lot of times. That's another thing. TBIs. I've had a lot of those. Apparently, according to all my medical stuff I have, okay, I've had RPGs fucking, explode right next to my goddamn head. I've run over IEDs. I walked over 2 of them in like 5 minutes. Somehow that didn't kill me. But the captain that was with us, freaking, he got all fucked up. Lost half his ear too. Poor guy. And he came up and he was like, I don't feel good. And fucking this whole side is just, I was like, oh shit, sir. I dragged his ass into the wadi and then immediately started like, hey, I need help. He lived, all right. He lived. He got his Purple Heart and all that. Good stuff. He immediately got out after that. Immediately. I don't blame him. But yeah. Freaking almost entered and cleared where someone set up a goddamn Dishka. It's a 50 caliber Russian-made machine gun. They set up that shit in the fucking hallway. facing 90-degree angle to the freaking door. Okay, so there's a hallway. This is how he would ingress in the door. Well, we blew that shit, and I was about to enter, and just rounds, just going. Thank God, thank God I didn't get in there yet. Probably literally thank him. I've been through it. Survived everything you could probably think of. Except helicopter crashes. Never had that happen. Thank God. Again. I mean, I've had my Chinook shot at a lot. And the Black Hawk. A lot. Got lucky on those. But yeah, never had a failed shoot. Never had a bad rappel. You could say in a way, my military career was full of luck and miracles. Now, my civilian life, not so lucky. Nothing but pain, loss, and suffering. So maybe I'm making up for all the miracles that were given to me for whatever reason. I don't know. But I've got pretty much no choice but to kind of believe in the miraculous. So again, I say, thank God.
And so he told the family that he would give Anurag 1 more hour of CPR, but after that, it would be over for good. And somehow, 5 minutes into the 5th hour, Dr. Subedi returned to chest compressions, and as he began, he suddenly froze. Something had changed. He felt the slightest heartbeat in Anurag's chest, and for the first time in over 4 hours of doing CPR, Anurag was starting to respond. Now, it was a very faint heartbeat, and it was very irregular, but it was a heartbeat nonetheless, which is just insane. They literally brought him back from the dead. But of course, now they had to keep him from going back and do whatever they could to bring Anurag back to normal health. He would remain in a coma for 12 days, breathing through a ventilator. But then on May 2nd, 2023, he opened his eyes. Anurag doesn't remember falling into the crevasse. He doesn't remember the 3 days that he spent inside of it. He doesn't remember being rescued. All he could say about the whole experience was, it felt like a rebirth. And of course, that statement came later because, get this, Anurag was actually voiceless for 5 months after this ordeal. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Severe frostbite had destroyed the fingertips on his right hand, forcing doctors to have to amputate them. Large skin grafts covered much of his right side. And when he finally stood up for the first time, his legs didn't remember what standing even was. However, step by step, Anurag fought his way back until eventually he was talking and walking again. Around October of 2023, 6 months after the accident, Anurag was able to actually meet Adam Bielewski in person. Like, I guess technically they met before, but like a proper meet. And they hugged, and they cried, and they talked for hours. Today, Anurag Maloo is not only alive, but from everything I can see, he's thriving. And even though his climbing days are over, who could blame him for that, he's still finding ways to make impacts. Anurag founded the Voice of Glaciers Foundation, which is a platform focused on protecting glaciers and mountain ecosystems. He travels the world speaking at universities, corporations, and other forums. He's received all sorts of awards and accolades and recognition for the work that he's done and for his incredible story. And folks, this was never supposed to happen. Anurag was supposed to have been lost in that crevasse on Annapurna. That's what all logic would say anyways. And Anurag's perspective on the incident is actually very surprising. He said, quote, "I am very grateful that Annapurna protected me, took care of me during those 3 days, and sent me back." He also says, quote, "And I'm grateful to her for letting me experience how close life and death are." I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here. This is a miracle story, obviously, But at the same time, it goes deeper than that. It's not even the story of a man against a mountain, right? It's the story of community. Anurag was as invested a member of the global climbing community as anyone could possibly be. He had devoted his life to protecting their habitats and improving the lives of people who work on the world's highest mountains or live near them. Community is what put Anurag on the mountain, and community is what saved him when he made the error that sent him sliding into what should have been his icy coffin. Adam and Mariusz didn't hesitate to help with Anurag's rescue because that's what you do for your fellow climber, no matter what the odds are. The Sherpa team definitely did not have to enter an avalanche zone to help him, but they felt like Anurag was one of their own. And Dr. Subedi didn't have to perform CPR for 4 hours, but he knew that he had to do everything he could before he gave up. Anurag's brothers didn't have to fight for the rescue operation, but their petition is basically what opened the door for all of these miracles to come true. This is what people do in a crisis. They act with optimism until the very last moment. Annapurna rarely gives people second chances, but Anurag is living proof that when you have a 1 in a million opportunity to be reborn, you do something with it. And so if you're inspired by any of Anurag's story, I would really appreciate it if you left some love for him in the comments section below, and I will see all of you in the next video. Oh, and speaking of that next video...
Okay, that was it. Cool. Well, that was pretty cool. The uncensored footage is why I'll never go mountaineering, period, from Kyle Hates Hiking. Jesus freaking Joseph. This video is past 2 hours long. Nobody's watching this. Well, I mean, if you're the one that asked me to, you're welcome. I don't really know what you were expecting, honestly. Don't really know what you're expecting from me. I mean, again, I'm honest, straightforward, blunt, and not much of a fuck to give right now. That said, it's pretty cool. I basically emptied out everything I could about this on this while it was going on. So you're welcome if this was satisfying to you. That said, I don't know if I'll disappoint anyone because this is not outside my realm of experience. Don't know what to say about that, really. But the thing is that, my life experience is greatly varied, and at the age I'm at the moment, pretty vast so far. Then again, there's millions like me. So, yeah, I'm nothing special. It's just you don't hear from too many of us. But yeah, it was pretty cool. When it came to the CPR, I have a theory. I have a theory about it. Because when you're doing chest compressions, all right, and you're forcing the lungs to expand and contract, you are technically moving blood. In a way, so to speak, in certain areas and certain ways. Okay, and you're forcing, minor oxygenation of that blood. I think what may have been going on is that while they were doing that, and they were stimulating the heart and the cardiovascular system at a bit of a lower level, okay, I think while they were doing that, what they were doing is basically an internal, pretty much akin to an internal refresh. Getting everything moving just so much over time that finally some of it got, enough of it got to his brain and through his organs, and he warmed up enough to where the body got that kick-started needed to start trying to move on its own, essentially. I'm trying to super condense all of this because there's a million different things I can say about it. I think that's possibly what happened. And if they had not continued to do CPR and kept doing the chest compressions and, forcing the lungs to expand and contract, and stimulating the cardiovascular system, I think there's a higher chance he would have remained dead. Because you can be in a much lower, basically imperceptible, like I've had people where their heartbeats were so low and so weak, they were excruciatingly hard to detect. And then I've had a couple where it didn't seem like their hearts were beating at all. Like that one guy I told you about, where I had his battle buddy who was a PFC, right? Because he was the gunner, and the guy he was trying to save was his team leader slash AG, and he was at it for hours. Anytime I checked in on the kid, I didn't see him stop. And I think something akin to that similar happened here, probably. That's my theory. I don't think it was like, just purely, work of God. Because God doesn't just directly do that stuff willy-nilly, quite obviously. But he will enable us to do so ourselves. And so that's my theory. That said, you let me... Oh, whoops. Okay, I ended it kind of early. Whoops, my bad. Well, anyway, that was pretty cool. That said, what did you think? What did you think? You let me know in the comments down below. All right, you know what time it is. Be good. Be safe. Make a good life for yourselves. Don't compromise safety and security for nobody and nothing. Death and disaster is only a second away. Do what you can today. And I'll see y'all in the next one. I'm Badger7 Actual, the formerly homeless veteran, Blast Cat Badger, out.